brother Zahir.
Right. What's
So
going on, brother?
I want to talk about shifting from old ways of thinking, old concepts and ideas, toward a new paradigm. Uh, Not necessarily discarding old concepts and ideas, but developing new ideas, new thought, new patterns of behavior, even new values. And a lot of this, you've been doing some really good work with your Maguzi. It's necessary. I want to just kind of get straight to it. We had a conversation earlier today, um, and we talk about this a lot. The idea of liberation, the idea of revolution, the idea of reformism, and having clear distinctions of what we're saying, what we mean, what we're doing, and what we expect as end results of any of these things.
The first thing that just came to my mind was, I was huge into scientific, they call it scientific socialism, right? And, take away all of the, it's Eurocentric, socialism and all this other stuff. The concept of science, right? And I was always taught that science was asking questions, and trying to achieve answers in a specific way, right? They have a scientific method that verifies your information, and there's even a methodology, right, that you use the scientific method in verifying information. But one thing I think is most important to understand about this process, you know, um, is the fact that old information can be corrected and it's not offensive. it's, I remember watching like Neil deGrasse Tyson one time, and I want to say this isn't about scientism, a word meaning that we're kind of creating a religion out of science, but it is appreciating something about what the scientific kind of method does bring for me. And I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about how, some people kind of came behind him and may have made a new discovery that may have proved something wrong or made an improvement on prior knowledge, right? And for them, he was saying in that community that he's in, the scientific community, it's like, oh, you just found some new information, or wow, you either proved what we said or you disproved it, and that's good because it increases our general knowledge and information that we could work from. And I think it's important for us to take that value, because the biggest issue we got, I believe, is it is very hard for us, meaning, I call it the Black Power tradition. And I split it into three: the Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, and socialism. And I say within this tradition, it's very hard for us to look at old information and say, okay, this may work, or maybe it doesn't work anymore, and it's not offensive, but we're looking at it in an objective way where we're understanding our environment and we're trying to move forward with the best option. And it gets offensive, right? It's like a belief system. It's like, oh, well, you don't, how dare you critique something Garvey said or did, or how dare you critique something Huey said or did. And it's not about trying to like prove yourself right and proving them wrong, but it's about getting the knowledge and updating it so we can say, okay, what are we trying to achieve and what's the best way of going about it? So when you asked me that, when you brought this topic to me, that's the first thing that came to my mind, is how do we switch this thing in a way where a new generation could take this information, take what's needed, and say, it's okay, these guys made some mistakes, so we disagree, but we're gonna move forward with this, without leading to all of the hoopla.
Yeah. Um, so it's really difficult, I think, for grown folk. I hate to say it that way, but like you get to a certain stage of your development. I'm not sure if it's a certain age or what, but it's like we get to a certain stage in our development, and we don't want anyone to question what we believe. We don't want anyone to question how we think or our perceptions about reality, even when they're wrong. And I believe that part of that is because of our uh, partly due to our religious indoctrination, right?
Mm.
And partly due to one thing I'm really learning from reading this book, The Turning Point. We have these modes of thinking, right? Um, in the first few chapters of this book, it talks about the Cartesian model of thinking or Cartesian mode of thinking, where we tend to see things in one paradigm, and the paradigm transcends into all other realms of our thinking. So our perception of reality is based on a flawed mode or model of thinking, and we don't even realize it. This brings into questions of, for me anyway, questions of whether or not we fully are capable of even processing information. And for all of us, even people who go through university and get their PhDs, still, why do we struggle with new concepts and ideas? It has to be rooted in some unconscious mode of thought that it's hard for us to get out of. And what I'm learning now and coming to understand is that we can't hold on to any ideas that are not like mathematical almost. You know what I'm saying? You can't hold
Mhm.
on to any ideas that um, you believe are true or that are popular or that may have been breakthroughs at one time, and like you said, we need to be prepared to take the information and move on and develop it to a degree that won't necessarily be beneficial for us but for generations to come. And that's for me like the whole purpose of doing any of this work, you know. And I tell you all the time, you need to be in a school somewhere teaching, because you got all this great insight on things, and you end up trying to share ideas and concepts with people who just don't get it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think what you're hitting on about the almost the religious mind, the unconscious thinking, I think is very big. Because one of the things that I had to learn was detach from my own kind of um attachment to an idea, right? And even though I put so much emphasis on it, I went out in the field, right? Like I was joining these groups and I'm literally reading the books and I'm saying, okay, this is the method that they told us to do, right? And we believe this is true based off of what you guys are telling me. So now I'm going to put this into action, right? And then I'm going to go back. So, things like community patrols, I've done this in the communities, and I'm sitting there looking up case studies of people doing it in Brooklyn in the 80s through the New African Theoretical Journals. And I'm sitting here doing all of this stuff. And everybody's so gun-ho with it. Everybody's like, yeah, this is what we need to do. We're gonna abolish the police, we're gonna patrol our own streets, and we're gonna control the community. And so while I'm doing this and I'm researching, I'm thinking to myself, well, what is the end goal here? What are we actually trying to accomplish when we do this? And how do we keep this going? What went wrong with the people in the past, right? Because I was reading New African Theoretical Journal. I think they called it Vito Wawatu's. I think it was book, I can't remember if it was 10 or 11. And they were talking about community patrols they set up. And I'm just thinking, this is the 80s. This is a New African group. It's in Brooklyn. This should be a perfect case study as in how something should work. And I'm just thinking to myself, if they attempted to do something in the 80s, what's going on what happened there, and why would we think we could continue to do it now if it didn't work then? And what happened then, if anything, that we should prepare for or change for our current situation? But when I started asking these questions, right, I end up saying, okay, wait a minute, this may be wrong. But others were kind of like, oh, we just want to do the action. Like they talk about theory and practice, right? And it's just like, well, we just want to do it. Let's
At
get
least,
together and take pictures. Oh, what do you
yeah, at
say?
least we're doing something.
At least we're doing something. And let's get together and get these guns and take these pictures and put on our uniforms. Don't we look so cool? And obviously, these are some of the moments where I started sitting back and going, okay, it may not have been the FBI after the 70s on why people suck now, right? And I'm saying that to say, like, I started to see a trend of there's not a lot of study and there's not an emphasis on studying. The emphasis is always on, well, at least we're doing something.
Yeah.
And it feels good to do it, and whatever happens of it, we're in the moment of doing it. And there's a little bit of mindfulness, or there's a little bit of, I guess, wisdom there in terms of, just be in the moment of doing things. And it does feel good, right, to protest for the first time. When you're out there, it does, you feel good because it's your first time doing it. But I started asking these questions. What about the 10th time that you do it? What changes?
For the record, I'm not going to anybody's protest ever. No.
Hey, you're smarter than I am now. Because when I got out the Army in 2015, the first week I was out, I went to a protest in Chicago, right, to raise minimum wage. And I don't even know if it worked or not, right? But I just hopped on a bus. Now I just want to do my part. But when I'm actually in the organizations and I'm thinking, I wrote the liberated zone theory. And so I'm like, okay, this is what our objective is. So how are we getting there? And it's hitting me like a ton of bricks. This ain't gonna get you there. This just ain't gonna work. And I'm coming up to people like, I don't think this is gonna work. Like, what is our end goal? Man, look, we can kind of get some, attention from this. We could kind of get some popularity. Don't worry about it. Like, just do it. And that just started frustrating me a whole lot, like stuff like that, or even some of the things that I was reading, like as I'm into like some anarchist studies, and I started seeing some of the things that they were saying with the movements, like as far as like going into neighborhood associations and trying to keep up with popular movements. And I'm saying, well, what's up with this? Why don't we add this? Maybe study what they're saying, because it may be able to guide our actions. And again, all of it was kind of dismissed for a notion of doing what feels good in a particular moment. And so I'm saying all this to say that, belief plays a huge role in, I think, why we get stuck, because it's not a thinking of understanding and then doing or analyzing, which I think is what all this is about. When I think of people, and I'm trying not to be too Marxist in our African center space, but I think of Marx, I think of Shenkata, and I think of these people. I'm thinking of folks who were serious, people who had a method, and they were scholars. And Walter Rodney, he's a scholar. It's an understanding, it's a rigorous study, and it's action. And I started to see that the rigorous study was not there, and it was just about a belief. We believe that we can do this. We believe we can win. We believe this. We believe that. We believe that we can have our own nation within the nation in the South. We believe that we could, eventually take over the state in America. If we just organize the people enough, give enough classes, give enough free food, mutual aid, then enough people will get together and have this revolution. And I'm like, well, what data? I mean, like, how do you prove what you're saying is true? how do you have a guy and within 5 or 10 years you can say, okay, we moved this closer to our goal or we haven't? And constantly those questions were really just thrown out, on the basis of feel good politics, feel good in the sense I'm feeling good doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you talk about that religious mind, I just feel like belief overrides a kind of analysis, and I think that that's a big problem.
I agree, and I'll take it even further. Um, the uh, the belief that so it's okay to have the belief if the belief informs uh, analysis and action toward a predetermined goal or objective, right? And I ask this question all the time. I was asking somebody this question online today. When we say things like revolution, right, or liberation or freedom, what does it mean? What does it tangibly look like? What is the goal clearly defined? And you never get answers. So it's like, to your point of the religious type of thinking, it's like, well, we're going to do all this stuff so we can get to heaven one day. Well, where's heaven? Where's liberation? Where's sovereignty? Where's freedom? What do these things actually look like? And you don't get answers. So, I agree with you. And like I said, I'll take it a step further. It's the belief in itself is one thing, but there's not even a true clear idea on what you're believing in and why. You know, where is it going to take you? Where is my belief taking me to? It's like I can walk outside to the corner of my block every day at 7:15 a.m. because I believe the bus is going to be there, right? Why do I believe that the bus is going to be there at 7:15 every day? Well, one, there's a city bus schedule. Two, there are other people standing out there waiting on the bus. And three, I've seen the bus come between 7 and 7:20. So I believe I'm going to go out there and the bus is going to be out there. With these ideas that we hold quite often, and I want to really kind of look at the idea or concept of revolution in America. This idea, we may have seen it manifest in other countries, in other times, in other places, but the circumstances that either led to or the circumstances that made up this thing or the multiple parts that come together to create this thing look totally different from our experience here. So we can't logically study a course of action based on something that we believe is going to work here because it worked somewhere else. And a lot of times we don't fully even understand what we're talking about when we look at those other things. So I ask the questions. Like I said earlier, I ask those questions and you don't get answers. You get insults more than you get answers. You either get ignored or you get insulted, right? Because no one wants you to challenge their thinking, especially when it's popular thinking, right? The idea or concept of Black revolution or studying political economy or studying revolutionary science or whatever because this person said so, or this person did this, or this movement did that. It's just so flawed and it's so illogical that it really begs me to question not just the intent of people who propagate certain ideas, but also their sanity. Like you can't really again, like the religious thinking, like you can't really believe this stuff. You just really cannot believe what you're hearing or what's being said. Like there's no way you really believe that. So that's where the confrontation comes in. So I'm glad that we can talk about this and put it out for other people to, either agree or disagree, whatever. I'm open to it. But I would like for people to really start questioning what they're saying, why they're saying it, and who they're listening to, and begin to really come to a place where you stop listening to what someone else is saying and look at the work that is in place instead. You know what I'm saying? We throw all these names out. Well, such and such said, and this person said, and he said, and that said. I'll point out books to read if those books are based on sound, historical, and scientific material. It's not so much what the person said, but more so what they point out and how useful it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does like I was talking about, or we were talking about earlier, like a lot of case studies, right? Needing examples because, as you talked about ideas, right? This is again, I think your conversation brought me to Garvey, right? I was studying Garvey in one of my political education courses, and he was saying how like one lynched Negro, evokes a passion in them to join, the UNIA. And then what you have there, when I was in MXGM, they had the same thing. They said the same thing about red phase, black phase, and green phase. But, you get this powerful feeling that you just want to do something, and then it's like, once you get that feeling, there's this, you're open to this information that's fed to you. Right. And then it's these sources, these people, these elders, it's in these groups, and they're telling you, yeah, man, this right here, this is what it's been for so long. And so you don't question these particular sources, and you're kind of caught in this emotional, fervor, so to speak, this passion for wanting to do something for Black people. And so you're almost kind of duped, almost in a sense. I hate to use that term. It's there's this moment in time where you're most open to hearing all of this stuff, but the ideas have just been so forgotten, pushed back in time. And so when people join, they're joining by themselves. These lone wolves that are popping up all over America, right? Throughout the diaspora and everything, right? On the continent, people are getting this new information, and they're just like, oh man, they're feeling good about it. But then what you're getting almost is like the greatest hits of Black Power without any context. So it's like, certain people studying guerrilla warfare by, Kwame Nkrumah, and they're not putting the whole book in its entire context. But what they're getting on top of that, and we all been there as conscious people, well, you're watching the documentaries, you reading the books, you're brainwashing yourself. And, and if you feel like you really want to do something, and you got folks who've been in the movements telling you, man, see, the problem is they not recognizing real African warriors or real revolutionaries. So we got to go out there and just overthrow them. That's the answer. Kwame Nkrumah said it. Look at what the BLA did. And then you're thinking, oh yeah, that's right. And good people too, right? Like people who have status in the movements may agree. People with names. Here's these. Back in the day, we shot up the police stations and all this other stuff. We're modern day Nat Turners and all this other, and it gets to the person. I know because I've been there, right? Like I heard this stuff, and I'm like, yeah. We talked about this earlier, and I'm gonna say it. When I was 18, 17, and I watched that documentary of George Jackson the first time on YouTube, I was like, oh, when he had the revolution in prison. Guards got killed and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, man, the dragon was set free. Look at that. Wow, revolution. When I went back and watched it like a year ago, I'm looking at it now, like I really think his mind wasn't in a good place. Like what I was telling you earlier, I
Yeah.
thought he was depressed because of his brother was killed, and he found out that he was going to be in prison probably for the rest of his life. He don't change his act up. And for me, when I look at it a little older, I see somebody that's more in despair and is using this rhetoric to kind of justify this action,
Yeah.
without a context. And when we don't get those contexts, right, we think that that's what we're supposed to be doing now,
Yeah.
with a proper, context to the situation. And if we, like you said, if we hear anything different, you're a hater, or you're
Yeah.
afraid, you're weak, so on and so forth.
We even take these individuals and kind of make them into a superhero. You know,
Right.
we've been so ingrained with this hero worship and hero mentality that we'll take that person and we'll idolize them as being, a real person. They were real. In the street they say he was a real nigga, right? But they were really crazy, you know, because the average working person, which most of us are, the average working person, you got a wife, you got children, you got a home, job, whatever, a career, you're not going to go out and do any of these things, you know? And if you unfortunately find yourself in prison, you're going to try and make bail and get back to your life. You're not going to go in there and be like, well, I'm a real nigga, I'm a thug, I'm a revolutionary, send me to the hole. You're not you're not gonna do that.
Right,
Nobody in their
right.
right mind is gonna do those things. You know what I'm saying? So it sounds so great. Like George Jackson wrote some amazing work, Blood in my eyes, Soul of That Brother. Amazing work, right? Work that we can use to educate contextually, properly. But some of us have taken that dragon, have taken that person and turned him into some kind of superhero. Like, oh, look what he did. Because we've been programmed, one, to appreciate the violence, right? This person's killing people and fighting. They're courageous. They're fighting the power. And then on the for two, we've been ingrained with celebrating the idea of uh, uh, fighting the system, right? So you kind of take George Jackson like being Superman and a revolutionary like Nat Turner at the same time. So this hero figure who was willing to risk his life and freedom and everything else to go against this beast of a system that's been oppressing us, right? When all
Mm-hmm.
actuality, we should be looking at getting away from the system rather than trying to fight it. You know what I'm saying? We
Right.
these ideas of fighting the system, and this person that fights the system is a hero. I think it's just bogus, because in order for you to risk everything that you have in this present context to just go out and die, or go out in a blazing glory of gunfire or what have you, you really got to come to a place where you don't have anything else to live for, or at least in your mind,
Mm.
think that I don't have anything else to live for, or freedom or death or whatever. Um, when all actuality, we should be trying to develop into the future. That's what we should be doing. Not
Yeah.
just trying to go out like Nat Turner. If we were in a state of enslavement, by all means, let's go out like Nat Turner. No, we're in a whole different era. Even in the 60s, whole different era. And that's why I said what I did about Garvey earlier. Garvey gave us a plan of, or an idea at least, of what we could be doing. And it didn't look like going to jail and, you know, calling the system out and killing the prison guards. Like, again, I don't want anybody to think, oh, you trying to bash the legacy of George Jackson. No, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is we can be smarter and we have more to live for. you know? And our goal should not to be to die in prison or to die in the street. Our goal should be to build our own communities, nation, and eventually our own continent of free, self-determined, and powerful people into the future. Why are we saying these things? Why is this not the celebrated conversation? That's my problem.
Man, I could tackle that question in a million ways, but one thing that crossed my mind while you was talking, because I had literally just learned this kind of term the other day, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It's a literature term. It's like a Christ-like figure. And when we were talking about the religious mind, and a lot of us coming from a Christian background, we're looking for Jesus, the Christ, the Savior. And I'm a huge fan of Malcolm X. It was the first person I read. He fits that archetype. Like
Absolutely.
it's a,
One of my
him,
personal heroes.
right. And I think that mentality runs throughout our movements from then even till now, of somebody wanting to be that leader, stepping up. And I think it was like these 5 stages. I was trying to look it up, but I couldn't find it. Um it was like social justice, and then it was like like a type of suffering, and then like a death, right? And it was this like that's the Christ figure that we're looking for. And I just feel like that's a big part of what develops, right, in this concept of death. It's almost like the that's the purest or realist way to determine that you really were about what you're talking about, is you died for your beliefs, right? It's like that's like the, oh man, if it wasn't, Huey is the realist because he died, so on and so forth. We can just go down the line, but we don't look at all the other things that were going on. But the fact that they died, it's like, oh, that's what it is. And I truly think that is a big part of it. Plus that, like you said, that like this focus on the fight. If we focused on nation building, I just think it would be a lot more productive, right? But when the focus is on trying to win this battle, win the hearts and minds, or go through the struggle, and everybody maybe trying to be their own Christ redeemer, right?
Yeah.
People trying to prove their own self-worth by dying in the blaze of glory. That becomes an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it in these movements. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say something, and we're gonna have to try and wrap up.
Okay.
We just saw what, more than 100,000 people die from COVID during the pandemic. Probably 1 million people. I don't know the number exactly, but I'm sure it was well more than 100,000 people died from COVID. Right? Didn't change the medical industry at all. Didn't change healthcare. It didn't change the state's approach to, biology or immunity, anything. Nothing changed, right? Every year, more than 70,000 people have died from opioid overdoses over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. Every year. Doesn't change anything. I'm saying that to say we can believe in our minds that if we fight to the death to change this society, it'll happen. It won't. It won't change the nature of this society at all. This system that we live in currently breeds on people dying. So if you want to run out and believe that I'm going to die for the cause, or that more of us should die for the cause, you're not sane. There's something wrong with you. That's my opinion. I feel like we should be trying to live for each other. We should be trying to live for uh, a new day. That's what we should be doing. We should concentrate our energy toward realizing a new African reality. And I'm gonna end right there.
That's perfect. That's the Magoozy saying, a new day awaits.
Beautiful.